Zoom conference. I have sent this information to a few of my network people, and so they need to know who you are. So thank you, Zia. And then should I start now? Is that the
half a minute? Half a minute. As you just hinted, let me also introduce you, my team, our team. Dr. S.Q. Masood, he is a ground labor worker, social activist based in Hyderabad. Laik Ahmed Khan, he is a innovator, he is a leadership trainer. City of Hyderabad and travel across the country in terms of training the youth in India. So three and thought that, if you recall, we met in when we met in Washington, we had been discussing about creating some forum where we can share our ideas and work with people with data, research, scientific temperament, and that was the place where we came together and we started this forum now. Hopefully, whenever you visit, we'll be meeting you together at some point of time. So now it's over to you, Dr. Sharif.
Thank you, Zia. And I hope I'm going to talk about two, three main points. First, I will read them. What are the points, so the listeners can make a note of them. And I hope, generally, I give public lectures. I welcome comments as I speak. But in this format, I think that will be difficult. So I would take probably about 20 minutes of my time to initiate and show you a few challenges. Note that this is a highly complex subject. I'm an academic, and my statements generally are backed by academic data. I'm an empiricist, but for many people, for some people at least, my statements could be controversial. And I don't mind if the issues are controversial, because the controversies generally are debated again, and some resolution would be sought out of a discussion. So my purpose, my conclusions need not necessarily be the final conclusions, because these are the pointers for you people to think more. So the issues which are raised today, even if they are controversial, they are important for you people, the participants, to think about them and take your own judgment about them. I'm not going to force my conclusions and judgments, even if I make some of them in my presentation. With this introduction, thank you again, Zia. And the title today is, can you read the title, Zia? You have what is the title?
Sir, you'll be talking on future Indian politics and Muslim responses.
So these are very specific topic. The future, the prospects. What is the future in India, and especially in the context of the Muslims. The issue of Muslims, the discussion of issue of Muslims in India is highly controversial. As you see in the history since independence, there have been very few open discussion and debates about the status of Muslims in India until 2008, I think 2006, when Dr. Manmohan Singh established the Sachar Committee. And I happened to have the opportunity to be its member secretary, and I spent substantial time doing research and contributing to the report. So that is the first and only kind of report which happened in independent India. And it created a lot of debates, public debates. There are a lot of policies which were also formulated. And this is not the time when we go and review what happened to such a committee, what happened to the subsequently, how is such a committee taken today. Today, the BJP and NDA government, how does it look into the report, which they never accepted that report was useful. So today we are not going to discuss about it. Maybe we will have another webinar at a later date. But today I'm going to talk about India. I'm going to talk about India in about 10, 20 to 50 year horizon, future. I see India in next 10, 20, 30, even 50 years has a bright future. Economically, India is going to dominate the world. Not that India will become one of the top most GDP because our per capita GDP will always be so low. The developed countries are already with very high per capita GDP like United States, Japan, Europe. You know, they have on an average per capita GDP between $60,000 and $80,000 per year. And India is only about 2,000 in real terms. In PPP terms, I'm not going to go in more details as to what is PPP. It's a bit higher. However, given a huge population base, we are about closer to 1.35 billion people. That means we have a large working labor force. So any country which has a large working labor force, they contribute a lot to the GDP. So each individual contributing a lot, relatively more to the GDP in the local context, it provides and it creates a pool of GDP, and that GDP pool in India is fairly large now, closer to $2.5 to $3 trillion. I think it's about $2 trillion, which is a lot of money. Compare that with China, which is about 18, 19 trillion dollars, US, which is about 20, 21 trillion dollars, and so on and so forth. But given the demographic transition in the world, India is the only large country having youth population. It is also one of the large countries having the child population, a child, let's say, below 18. Although our birth rates are falling, we still have a population momentum of the previous 20, 30, 40 years. So the people who were born in 70s and 80s, and then people who were born in early 20th century, they're all coming into labor force. Now imagine if we increase the productivity of these labor force. Generally, the productivity, the economic contribution of a person, of a labor who contribute to the nation. What do you manufacture, produce, sell? How much of money, how much of value you add to the national GDP? That is what is called the value added. That value added has been always low in India, per capita income, per capita contribution, but slowly it is increasing. One of the reasons why it is slowly increasing is that our population, particularly the younger population, is becoming relatively more educated, literate, and more skilled compared to our parents' generation. Our parents' generation, literacy was low, skill set was low, but now literacy is improving and skill set is also improving. In spite of that, we have millions of illiterate, uneducated, barely educated, technically not trained workforce. We probably have about 60 to 70 million labor force of that nature. We have only about 20 to 30 million labor force who are a bit educated, who can contribute to the modern sector jobs, who are part of the labor organized labor force. Unfortunately, out of about 100 million workforce, only about 10% or 11% of our labor force in organized sector, and most of us, we work in an unorganized or informal economy. However, because India is step by step growing in improving the education standards, quality of education and skill set, if it continues, if the education skill and value added increases substantially, if we continue this, then only can India reap the demographic dividends. So dividends are from demography, from our youthfulness, from our childhoodness, who will add more value 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now. Now, that is the reason it doesn't matter which government, what kind of government, it doesn't matter what kind of person is our prime minister. It really doesn't matter. We need some intelligent people to govern us. We did have some very highly intelligent and highly brilliant prime ministers in this country, starting from Jawaharlal Nehru to Dr. Manmohan Singh. Dr. Manmohan Singh himself, his own 10 years of prime ministership as an economist, and another 20 years of his leadership as a finance minister or RBI governor. He is, in my view, one of the giants of Indian statesman who has contributed, who has brought India, who has pulled India up to what we are today. And I'm sure the BJP government has recognized it, although politically they may oppose a few things and all that. And now we are in a situation, unless we literally destroy our economy for some knee-jerk purposes, like we did our banknotes, demonetization, something of that nature. I'm not going to go into policy critique at this moment, unless we destroy or we put our axe on our own feet. Our economy is going to grow, not because of the government policies, it is because of the vibrant labor force. So now, making that assertion that Indian economy is going to grow, now I am going to the second major point. Me being a social analyst, an economic analyst, I collect a lot of data. I go around different people. I'm a data collector myself. I talk to thousands and thousands of member people, women, children in villages, in towns. So I'm an empiricist. I'm a data collector. So I have to go and talk to people. And then I come back and write about it. So that is my identity. Now, during this process, I have put up a hypothesis. The hypothesis is the following. I have mentioned that income growth, India is going to see a good income growth, step by step, but our income growth is taking place. That means our middle class is going to improve. Our middle class is going to enlarge. So my hypothesis is that in India, as the middle class grows, the religious assertion also improves, also increases. The corollary of this hypothesis is, if you want to assert your religion, you need to have money. The poor person cannot assert her own religion. The poor person, let me put it other way. If you want to be a good Hindu, in the sense you want to do all those practices, all those pujas, and all the necessary way, the aratis and all that, you need to spend money. Similarly, you want to be a good Muslim, you need to do so many things, right? For example, even you have to take your own time away from your work to go to the mosque. That itself can happen when you are substantially income secure. So that means the religious assertion increases as the income growth take place. So they go parallelly up to a certain point. I don't know what that certain point is, at what level of income it tapers off. And then after a certain period, actually the religious assertion declines. This is a hypothesis. Think about it. And you see, if India's income is growing for next 50 years, religious assertion is also going to increase for next 20, 30, 40 years. But we econometricians and social scientists has to find out Is there a level in which it goes and tapers off? It levels, and then is there any reason why it comes down? It has happened in the Europe. It has happened in the Western world. The religious assertion in Western world increased as the Industrial Revolution took place, and over a period of time, it tapers off, and now secularism has taken roots. From that perspective, India is going to see increasing religious assertion. It doesn't matter whether a Hindu or you are a Muslim. Everybody likes to assert themselves as they become income secure. Now, this hypothesis is not tested empirically, at least in the Indian data. It is possible to do it. At the moment, we do not have a good databases, but we are trying to collect that information, and we will give you more academic results as in future. But now you see, India is so large and vast. India has two kind of very dominant diversity. One thing is regional diversity. North, South, Bengal, Kerala, UP, Andhra, Telangana. You see so many states, they are regionally highly diverse in many respects. And there is also income differences in these states. Like UP, Bihar, Bengal have low incomes. Like Punjab, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, they have relatively higher incomes. So the religious assertion, which has established a relationship with increasing income, is going to be different in different states. I don't know whether the income growth has already taken place in southern states where there is a fair amount of inter-religious harmony, in spite of the fact that radical Hindutva groups are very active, but there is a fair amount of mutual respect to religion, different religions are in South. And the South also on an average has the higher level of income. So is it going towards a kind of leveling off in South? So religious assertion is increasing in UP, Bihar, and Bengal. So there is an increasing religious assertion curve. Maybe after 20, 30 years, maybe that curve is going to go down. We don't know. This is a regional association between income and diversity. The second diversity is different religious groups, and within religion, different population identities, like among Hindus, scheduled castes, OBCs, the high caste groups, and minorities are Muslims. Muslims are the largest minority, who are closer to about 15%. Christians are small, 3%, and other. So their income levels are also growing differently. For example, Muslim incomes are growing very slowly. It is growing, but very slowly. Muslim education is growing slowly compared to the Hindu groups, including the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. So that is also causing a kind of friction between the religions and the caste system. Now, given this a kind of broader background, I want to now shift to the next point. Is I have given you the pointers as to what would be the fate of communalism in India in next 20 years. I've already given you a direction. There is no need to articulate that in a very clear terms. India is a growing economy, and as income grows, religious assertion grows. And when religious assertion grows, there is bound to be inter-religious and inter-caste friction. Now that is given for India. Don't ask me, are more Muslims will be killed in communal riots? What will happen to, should Muslims run away from cities and go to some places? I have no vision about it, and I have no reply to it. I don't want to talk about it. I have given you a dimension as to what is going to happen. So now let us come back as a Muslim myself. How do I feel that my life will be next 20, 30 years? And here I'm a kind of self-critique. If there is a problem between me and somebody, of course, it will cause because of factors relating to two human beings. I am also responsible in that. Whether I am responsible positively, negatively, let us analyze that a little bit. Now, somebody posed me a question. How can Muslims solve their problem in India? Because generally there is a systemic bias against Muslims in India. That systemic bias is also in the governance. I don't mince the word by telling that since the BJP has come to power, since the NDA has taken root, even the public policy has turned against the Muslims. And I have evidence, very strong evidence to do that. If somebody wants to know about it, if you belong to, let us say somebody is an RSS member, or somebody is a member of Hindu militant groups, if those people want to talk to me, I can prove that today India is highly Hindu radicalized, and Muslims are at the receiving end. And the Indian Muslims do not know what should be the reaction. And they are taking the beating at the moment. And situations like today, we try to find out what should be the right, response of the Muslims when we are facing arrows from all around. So now my question here is, why should Muslims talk to Muslims alone to find a solution for the Muslim situation in India? Why is that we as Indian Muslims are not able to talk to our Hindu neighbors, to talk to our Hindu friends about our problems? Have we ever tried doing it? Do we know how to do it at all? Why is that Muslims are not Hindu sensitive in this country where Muslims are Hindus are 80% of this population? Muslims are only 15. The other minorities are only 5. So why is this puzzle, the demographic puzzle, dominant Hindu society? Why is that I feel Muslims are not Hindu sensitive. We should be sensitive to their presence in our neighborhood, in our villages, in our mohallas, in our workplace. We are not that sensitive. Somehow Muslims in a way live in ghettos. They like to live around their mosque, create their own mohallas. And of course, I heard yesterday, some radical Hindu was telling there are so many mini Pakistans in India. Of course, that's how they feel, because for them, a Muslim is a Pakistani, idiots. What do you say? But we have also created those isolated Muslim areas which appear Pakistans to the radical Hindus. So living in ghettos undermine the importance of living together. So Muslims has to learn how to live in all public spaces. Muslims do not see India as a market. The whole world wants to sell things in India to Indians. 80% of them are Hindus, only 15 are Muslims. Now, we Muslims living in our own country, we don't see India as a market. Hamara market kahan hai? Be in my place. Sometimes our occupations are so formatted that they serve only other Muslims. We had to see India as a market. So we had to mend ourselves. to benefit from that market. So, in my view, religion, for example, my Islam, to me, is very, very precious. But it is also very private. It is not a public commodity. I don't have to color myself and come out and dance to show that I am a big, bahut pakka Mussalman. There is no need for it. Because for me, religion is a private matter. It must be protected. It must be protected. But it is a private matter. It is not something we should wear on the sleeves all the time. And this is my personal view. And some people may have problem with this, but I'm willing to take a comment on that. Now, imagine schooling, education. Where do we send our children to school? By and large, हमारे बच्चों को, the moment the child grows, we will try to see, where convent school, English padhana hai, but we can't afford. So what is the next best place? They say a madrasa. We will send it to that school. We deny our children an opportunity to mix and mingle with our Hindu neighborhoods. बचपन से ही हमको जुदा करने की कोशिश होती है हमारे मुसलमान एरिया में कि बच्चों को हम इन लार्जर कम्युनिटी से जुदा करके रखें. क्यों? क्योंकि only through that process will be our identity protected, which I disagree with. I never studied in a madrasa. I studied in a regular government school with Hindu friends. Today I have a lot more Hindu friends than my Muslim friends. I have very few Muslim friends, but I have a lot of Hindu friends. Even on a daily basis, they talk to me. They inquire about my welfare. Why is that? Because I use a public space, a primary school, a middle school, a high school, which was made available to all Indian citizens. For example, to be a little bit critical, I have a very good friend in Bangalore from where I studied. I have one of my closest friend who went to Al-Amin College to study, whereas I went to the government arts and college to study. I feel he became a very, very high level IAS officer. I salute him. He has done wonderful work. But I still feel that my education was more inclusive because it gave me opportunities to have my Hindu friends. And they are the 80% of our population. So I became Hindu sensitive. This is important. Now, grow, live, and prosper with Hindu friends and neighbors. Understand what is valuable to society, not to only my community. A problem here, including this webinar, we want to talk about Muslim welfare, and only Muslims want to talk about Muslim welfare. Muslims have no resources. जो resources वाले हैं वो भी देते नहीं हैं. मैं देखा हूँ ज़कात के वो देने के लिए दिखावे के लिए कुछ करते होंगे. But the resources are with the government, and we have no strategy to acquire those resources from government. Tell me what planning or what discussion we ever had to appropriate resources which are available with the government, state governments, panchayats, corporations, central government. Benefits from public spaces. The word is public space. What is a public space? Somebody can pose me a question. At that time, I will elaborate a bit on that. Now, I am going towards my conclusion, but before conclusion, I am going to make one more comment, which is sarcastic, but which is true. Recently, social media, I have seen hundreds of people appreciating the West Asia response. Koi Dubai princess, somebody OIC, responding West Asia to help Muslims in India. Gentlemen, do you think we get help from these people? What kind of help we get? Your help to protect you and your identity, your life, your job, your children, your women will come from my neighborhood Hindus, not from the West Asians. Mind you, don't misguide the Muslims of India by telling people that West Asians will protect us. I think these are the traps which unintelligent Muslim community through social media is tapping Muslims. Now, I want to get into the policy impact. The first thing which I urge, I presume that many of you people who are listening today are academics or academic oriented activists who have understanding of the structure. Now, I urge people who can do to analyze the Indian budgets where resources are allocated for poverty alleviation, resources are allocated for women's development, resources are allocated for child development, resources available for minority development. There are different heads of accounts. And I know that at least during the previous regimes, a substantial amount of money, both at the center and the state governments, was allocated to the minorities, to women, in which Muslims have a share, to children in which Muslims have a share. So I urge people to see what was happening 10 years before in allocation relative to the total budget, what share of that amount was given, and what is happening since the NDA government in 2014 has come. That is number one. Now, the second most important thing I want to urge is this government, since this government has come, it has created, I don't like quotas, I don't like reservation. Reservation is not the policy which will primarily benefit masses. It may help some very few intelligent boys and girls. I'm not against that, but I am not for it as well. But in spite of that, this government has announced 10% of EWS, an economically weaker sections quota. Now, I have done op-eds. You can Google and find my op-eds. I have found out that 47% of that quota belongs to Muslim community alone. Because with the Muslims, जो हकदार हैं ये 10% में, क्योंकि मुस्लिम का गरीबी की रेखा से कम, गरीबी रेखा से भीतर की जो प्रोपोर्शन है वो मुस्लिम्स में जो हिंदूस हैं, जो हाई कास्ट हिंदूस हैं, उससे कई गुना ज्यादा है. तो ये EWS कोटा के अंदर मुस्लिम्स का शेयर अराउंड 45% होना चाहिए. फॉर एवरी 10 jobs, 4 to 5 jobs must be given to Muslims, and let us work on that, how to do it. Now, I also urge that Satchar committee recommended that there has to be an equal opportunity commission. Now, this equal opportunity commission is a debating platform. If equal opportunity commission were to be already in place, this webinar would have taken place in that platform. So it is a debating platform where we invite not only people of our type, people of our nature, but everybody. It is open to all, including the radical Hindus, including hamare radical Muslims, including Dalits, including everybody should discuss an issue, because Muslim development issue, Muslim underdevelopment is a national issue. It is not a problem of Muslims alone. So equal opportunity commission ki demand rakhe. Now I know that central government will not respond to this, but our state governments like Telangana, state governments like Kerala, state governments like West Bengal can still put a debating platform where data and analysis can be openly debated. Now, in the post-COVID reconstruction, there is a lot of money. Prime Minister has announced a huge amount of money to be distributed. So we must demand, listen to this carefully, small loan manager in every bank branch, small loan manager, a special position, which is not there in India. Unfortunately, I don't know why. we give millions of rupees supposed to be distributed to the poor, but we don't have an officer who is capable of controlling or analyzing, evaluating. So we need to demand a small loans manager in every bank so that the diversity in the bank loan is monitored. So with this, I also request that we should make a demand for multi-caste oversight, multi-caste and multi-religious oversight committee in each public institution. Now, Zia is already sharing you some of these talking points. These are general talking points. You can share this to anybody who wants it through email or WhatsApp. And I don't know how much time I have taken, but now I know I have not been very cohesive. It is not easy to be very cohesive, but I hope that I have raised a few issues with you listeners. Zia, can you tell me how many people heard this? What is the final count? And then I can take some question answers. I don't know how many people heard this. Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
We have 50 plus people are there, exactly.
Okay.
Good number of people are there.
Yeah. Okay, that's it, yeah. And how do you want to, how many minutes was it? This was more than half an hour or what?
Yeah, it went for 35 minutes.
Okay. So now, how do you want to moderate whatever time you have with you?
We have a couple of questions here, which can be starting point. Dr. Munir is putting a question very precise that, do you think that India's composition of its labor force is part of its demographic dividend? If so, what is so special and dividend about it?
Yeah. Yeah, the question, demographic dividend has two words. One is demography, the second one is dividend. Demography is population structure, men, women, of what different ages. And as you see, India has the largest amount of youth in the whole world, proportionately. I think India has about 35% of the population, which is youth. And India has a labor force of around 100 million. 100 million. I'm sorry. India has a labor force of 100 million, the Muslim labor force alone, 15%. India has a labor force of about 600 million, about half of our population. Now, the dividends means the value added. How much can you add? So, as we know, a better educated person adds more value. She or he earns more income compared to a less educated. Between a less educated and a illiterate, even a barely educated, 5वीं class, 10वीं class पढ़ा हुआ बच्चा earns more. For example, he becomes a driver earning about 20,000 rupees compared to a manual labor who earns only about 15,000 rupees. So, if India has to reap the demographic dividend, we have to educate our children, we have to skill them appropriately, and about half of our labor force is illiterate even today. And closer to 60-70% of our labor force doesn't have skills. They're all manual labors. Some of the skills are traditionally from parents to children. So still, you know, let us say a carpenter's son is still a carpenter. Diversity nahi ho pai. So if we want to create demographic dividend, we have to diversify and diversify based on education and skills. So India we have to invest more on education and skills, which is not happening. Although there is a skill development budget, although there is a highly, we have n number of universities, India is gearing towards higher education. Actually, we cannot create demographic dividends by only creating universities. We have to create more good primary school, more good middle school, more good high schools. That is where our investment should be, and that is how demographic dividend will be. Thank you.
There is one question Tabriz puts here. There are several few studies conducted by Indian Institute of Dalit Study, which found that house owners' prejudices deny housing for Muslims in urban areas in comparison to Dalits. But Dalits also get a lot of discrimination in housing sector. So, sir, the questions arises that how Muslim would be able to live in a new locality? What would be the avenues they enter into new localities? It's about urban ghettos somebody is talking about.
Yeah, well, it's a very good question. I know, I am aware of those studies. There are two very well-known studies which I know, done by Thorat and recently done by Dr. Mohsin from, I think he works in Jindal Law School. He has done a study in Mumbai. I'm aware of this. So these are highly sectoral issue. One can work on that. I think some of these new housing loan policies will come handy to deal with it, and that is where Equal Opportunity Commission should have been a very useful platform to deal with it. And if you go and analyze, and I have done this review, the usefulness of Equal Opportunity Commission in England, in USA. So some of these highly discriminatory practices cannot be dealt with legal system because it takes a lot of time. It cannot immediately address a few things. So if one demands the establishment of an Equal Opportunity Commission, we can address some of these issues. Yes.
There's two, I'm clubbing two questions by Dipsha Dhal. She says, can you also give some examples of the biases you mentioned within public policy or social protection regime in India? In comparison also, that does ghetto cultures lead to systematic bias against minorities in the world, including especially US being a prime example?
Yeah, well, to answer her second part first, look, US is at least a mature democracy. The US legislative institutions, the institution which is not entirely legislative, they are very independent, and the legal, the urban ghetto system prevailing in United States. And also, for example, because of the COVID, even the so-called the biased president of United States is the policy to distribute some amount to the people. It has reached every nook and corner of United States, and $1,200 have been given in their bank accounts already. Every poor person has already got that money. You tell me in India, so many policies are decided, 500 denge, 10,000 denge, 5,000 denge. I never come across practically kisko mile, kahan mile. There is no oversight. There is no system where we can prove that this money is well spent. So the biases are very grave and very serious in India compared to in the United States. And that is the reason why we have to work hard into seeking justice against biases in India.
Mumtaz Begum, she says, this is a small question, in this pandemic period or pandemic situation, how the unorganized sector will get affected in general, and Muslims in particular, because large number of Muslims are dependent on unorganized or informal sector?
Yeah, this is a very good question, and we are thinking about it, but we are unable to understand the structure clearly, because we cannot move out of the homes, and these are the issues. We cannot make judgments, or we cannot take decisive stand without knowing the truth, without going out and talking to these migrants who are walking on the roads, who are waiting on the borders, who have not worked for last almost 60 days, who have not opened their kirana shop, or who have not used their telas, who have not opened their micro manufacturing or artisanal workshops. So this is a devastation. This has not happened ever in the history of humanity. The whole world got affected. It is not, there is not even one country, very few countries who are not got affected. So the whole humanity, and its impact in India is going to be very large. The impact on India is going to be more from now onwards to next 2, 3, 4 months in the area of employment. Now, on the one hand, there is a relaxation in the lockdown. Industries, manufacturing units, informal sector, they want to open their manufacturing purpose, but they don't know whether there is a demand for it, because last 2 months, everybody has lost their disposable income. There is no cash in the hand. So unless government brings what is called universal, the same policy which United States did. United States almost gave $1,200 to every human being who pays taxes there. So money is transferred through the taxation structure. So every person who files a return, they got $1,200. So it is a kind of universal basic income. So now that one person will go to the stores, will buy food, or will buy necessities, will buy oil, will buy gas, or whatever. But in India, it has not reached any people. The government should immediately, without discrimination, distribute at least 1,000 rupees per mahila for every woman. This recommendation was done by me and a few others in Delhi government in 2009-10, that India can afford to give 1,000 rupees for every woman in this country, especially every woman below poverty line. So the basic income should be given to woman's hand. It should not be given to the man's hand. So both the man and the woman's 2,000 rupees per month, India can afford to give per month to every family in India. So this kind of basic income should be done, and they should not just go based on, whether you have a PDS card, whether you have identity cards, and so on and so forth. They have to give this money to everybody, particularly migrant labor do not carry adequate IDs. So somehow they have to go to the manufacturing units, they have to go to the building construction site, they have to go behind the manufacturing units where thousands of labor is stacked into a kind of tinned residences. They have to go and distribute this money so that they can go to the market and bring vibrancy in the market. So the basic income is the key, at least for next 3 to 6 months. Without that, it is very difficult for the informal sector to come back to farm, because the informal sector would not know whether a potter is making so many pots. The potter would not know whether their pots would be sold. Similarly, let us say a carpenter goes and manufacturing sofa. They don't know whether the sofa will be sold, how many sofas they want to make, because the whole dynamics of disposable income has changed in India.
Dr. Dona Gandhi Krishna, the question is like, your contention of Muslims becoming Hindu sensitive is a sort of time-consuming solution. What do you suggest to combat the Hindu fundamental tendencies at the present? I'm clubbing another small question similar to that what could be more what you have elaborated to become more sensitized when we talk about sensitizing with our Hindu friends in neighborhood. Can you explain that?
Well, I appreciate this question, and I urge you to have more conversations on this in future. But I don't consider Muslims becoming Hindu sensitive is a long-term and time-consuming. It can happen immediately. We have to just go out and talk to our Hindu neighbor. That's all we have to do. We don't do that. We generally avoid, establishing relationships. Well, we are there. We look at them. We go around. We don't sit with them. Let's say, how many Muslims participate in a panchayat meeting? First of all, they don't get elected. The system itself has eliminated them from panchayat and grassroots level institutions. So how the hell Muslims can communicate with the Hindu neighborhood? There has to be a new institutional mechanism. Civil society has to come out. If there are some issues, the Muslim women, the Muslim youth have to be part of a larger, finding out larger solution of the society as a whole. But somehow I see that Muslims are not co-opted. For example, more recently, I'm analyzing data, since the BJP has come to power, what has happened to our public institution? In how many public institutions Muslims are there in decision-making roles? Zero. So Muslims are thrown out. They are not important for the benefit of the society. That is the reaction of the establishment. But the civil society has to become vibrant. Even in civil society, I know the civil society, the so-called mainstream, they how many Muslims are there in their staffing pattern? Why is that Anganwadi centers, which is such a small and mean institution, where छोटे बच्चों को बीच में लाते हैं, वहाँ how many Muslims are there in Anganwadi centers as Anganwadi managers or Anganwadi karyakarta? I have seen Muslim maholon mein Anganwadi is a Brahmin woman. Actually, she is doing a very good job. People love her, but I don't see the reason why a Brahmin woman is a Anganwadi worker in a Muslim maholla. So this issue is a very larger malaise of anti-Muslim rhetoric in public system, and that is what we need to fight. We need to seek our place. Muslims can come out. For example, what is the share of police in major cities like Mumbai, like Calcutta? Even in Calcutta, in the police, there are not more than 3% policemen, where 30% of population is Muslim in Bengal. Even Mamta Didi, since she has come, she has not taken a recourse where she has to. She did not try to increase the share of Muslims in police. Why the hell is this happening? This is very clearly an anti-Muslim establishments, governments, politics. We have to fight. We have to come out. We have to face the bullet. We have to die on the street. We have to die. But we have to do peaceful protests. And I know the people at the helm. Peaceful protest is also taken as anti-India sedition, and that is bullshit. We need to come out in hordes. We have to get out in the main roads, main streets. Our protest should not be near the mosque. Our protest should be in front of government offices, in front of the police stations. If they come and put bullets, we have to take some bullets. Let us get ready for it.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of questions in the remarks what you just made lastly, including one that in this miserable situations due to COVID-19, the large number of poor are having a tough time in India when you have plenty of available grains and laborers are running across the country on roads hungry and dying on the way, giving birth on the roads. Women are in very pathetic situations. And second, the
Do I have to join again? Am I
You are connected.
audible? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. You could put one question at a time. Too many questions, long questions. I may not be in a position to reply. This whole issue of migrants, the poor people, I want to answer it now. Can I go ahead?
Yeah. This mobile, if you
Yeah.
can, this change the direction of your mobile, just that it's horizontal. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Uh, yeah. Now this is very unfortunate. I think. Look, it is easy to be critical of the government policy, but I think one of the not very intelligent policy of this government was the first lockdown was announced given 4 hours of time. In the midnight it says since from the morning it will be locked down. I think that is where this prime minister and this establishment did the mistake. They should have given at least 24 to 48 hours for people to get prepared. At that time, if the migrant labor was to demand movement to their homes, they should have worked towards it, or they should have taken migrant labor in confidence that the grains will be supplied to the places where they are, which was not done. This was one of the biggest blunder which this prime minister and this establishment has done. They did not apply mine. कि लॉकडाउन करने से क्या होगा हमारे कंट्री, लॉकडाउन करने से और ज्यादा केसेस होंगे क्योंकि हमारे घर इतने छोटे हैं, 5-5, 8-8 लोग रहते हैं. So where, how could lockdown bring social distancing? Is social distancing feasible in our country? No. Social distancing is not feasible. So this prime minister and this establishment, when they thought about lockdown, they thought about only middle class. They thought about only those people who live in this tall towers with 2,000 square feet, 4-bedroom houses. They thought, अरे 4 लोग रहेंगे, एक रूम में रह जाएंगे, social distancing हो जाएगा. They never thought about the problems of our poor people. So this is my critique. I may be, people can do whatever they want to. This is my opinion, and this was the wrong thing to be done. Now, it was so difficult. They could not arrange immediate transportation in spite of the fact they promised that they will allow people to move. So there are millions of people. You know how many people, interstate migrants? About 40% of our labor force. If you include commutation, traveling 10 to 15 miles from neighborhood towns to a major work area. So about 400 million people move from one place to another for work. Out of that, some people go in the morning, come back in the evening. Some people go and stay there for 1 month, 2 months, 1 season, 1 year. So this is India. This is how India is integrated. This is one of the greatest thing happened to India is we people can move from one place to another. The Biharis can go and work in Bengal. The Biharis can go and work in Kerala. The Udiya people can go and work in Surat. This is the greatest gift of God, greatest gift of Mother India for people. And only when the policy thinking comes, you don't think about that. Assume that if the migrant labor doesn't contribute to the nation, this country will see negative growth rate. Our growth rate is not coming from Ambanis and Tatas. Of course, they have money. It is coming from our labor who earns 500, 600, 1,000 rupees by hard work in the factories. Our farmers. These are the people who are contributing to our GDP. So we have to better think about them and make policies. And once you think about the poor people, automatically the focus has to come to Muslim labor force. Automatically, we don't need Muslim policy. We don't need Muslim specific. You think of poor people, you think of Muslim labor. But While you think of poor people, you don't discriminate, think only poor Hindu people. Think of only poor people, irrespective of caste, religion, and region. And that is how the policies have to be. Thank you. Am I audible? Somebody hearing? Am I live?
Yeah, it's you are live and audible to everyone. There is a small question that how can the police force be made to be more sensitive towards Muslim and then poorer? They are treated very badly during the pandemics, especially. Will you be able to reflect upon that?
Yeah, मुझे लगता है कि look, these are not easy solutions, but मुझे लगता है कि जैसे डॉक्टर लोग कसम खाते हैं ना कि Hippocratic कि I will serve there. So उस we have to make our police to take in front of whatever God they pray. We have to make them take qasam. That is all. The police is so malign. The police is so corrupt. So how can you change the police system when it is corrupt? How can and the police? I remember the day when policemen in Delhi went to near to a mosque and said you cannot give azan, and there was a Muslim lady who was confronting that policeman. Who the hell gave him permission to do that? This is all the misuse of police by the local politician, local muscle man. And the LG immediately, very evening or very next day, came open. He said, and that policeman used the LG's name. LG ne hame permission diya hai, just to tell them that it is not the state government, it is the national government who has permitted this fellow. So these biases are far too strong. I think our legal structure is also, has cowed down, caved down, or cowed in. So I'm sorry to say, I'm deeply hurt. The professionals do not work as professionals. So मैंने कहा है, this is the time when like-minded people, Muslims, along with like-minded Hindus, there are a lot of like-minded Hindus who will come to share bullets with you. Mind you, I am telling you this, we have to go out. We have to go out in peace rallies. We have to go out in large numbers. We have to use, we have to use our slogans and our statements in a very dignified and civilized manner, but we have to oppose the government policies openly. That stage has come. It is, please do not leave this only to students of Jamia or students of JNU. This is now for everybody. All Muslims have to come out from their homes, whether they are old. बच्चों को एक छोड़ दो, सब लोग बाहर निकलो. We cannot take जो जुल्म है, जुल्म के लिए हमें छाती आगे बढ़ाना होगा. We have to come and take मुक्काबाजी, गालियां, थूकना, खूनरेजी. Please come out. That is the only solution. Otherwise, wait. Take a long term. Think of community. Think India as my India. Develop this through your work. I know it is very difficult. Become Hindu sensitive and become, work for the nation. Just don't work for your mohalla, your company, or your identity. Our identity बरकरार रहेगी, कोई नहीं ले जाएगा आपकी. We have to fight for our rights. Still, courts are there. Respect. Create a corps of lawyers. There are a lot of legal things we can still fight in the courts, but we have to also come on the street. I am ready to do it. You call me tomorrow, I will be there in front of the parliament street.
There is a question, if I am correct, this is from Professor Abdul Saban, says as, do you have any advice for Muslim organizations like Jamaat-e-Hind, Tabligh-e-Jamaat, erstwhile Babri Masjid Action Committee, and Muslim Personal Law Board? Their past actions, it seems to have compromised Muslims on many fronts. What your advice will be for them?
Yeah, I hope I get that some of my earlier talk about becoming Muslims becoming part of this public space is what those institutions and organizations has to think. You know, uh, I I I was dismayed when I was in a group of people. कुछ लोग बात कर रहे थे, मैं कह रहा था पब्लिक इंडिया में बहुत गरीबी है, मुस्लिम्स को कुछ करना चाहिए, अपने गांव में कुछ करना चाहिए. So some people came say, sir, I have this much of money. आप जो भी चाहिए आपने आप इंडिया में आप काम करें, हम आपको पैसे देंगे. मैंने कहा ये बहुत अच्छी बात है एंड यू हैव टू डू इट एंड बट देन दे केम आउट इन द एंड दे सेड सर हम पैसे तो देंगे मगर ये पैसे सिर्फ मुसलमान बच्चों तक पहुंचना है, ये आप हिंदू बच्चों को नहीं दे सकते. नाउ माय response to all these religious oriented people is in this one episode कि क्या हम मुसलमान सिर्फ मुसलमान के बच्चों को पैसे देंगे, मुसलमान बच्चों को देखभाल करें? आप कौन होते हैं मुस्लिम को मुस्लिम प्रोटेक्शन? क्या कर पाएंगे आप? मुसलमानों के प्रॉब्लम मैं बताऊं तो आप भाग जाएंगे घर छोड़ के. पता है प्रोस्टिट्यूशन में कितने मुस्लिम वीमेन इन्वॉल्व हैं? पता है आपको बेगरी में कितने मुसलमान इन्वॉल्व हैं? आपने कभी पॉलिसीज प्रोग्राम्स बनाए उनको उन तक पहुंचने के? आपको पता है कि HIV एड्स की घिनौनी बीमारी मुसलमानों में कहां कहां पहुंच रही है? मस्जिद के और मदरसों के स्टेप्स यानी दहलीज तक पहुंच गई है वो बीमारी. क्यों पहुंची? आपने उसके बारे में सोचा है? और बोलते हैं कि जो पैसा मुसलमान देगा सिर्फ मुसलमान बच्चे को देगा इस कंट्री में रह के. और क्या हमारा इस्लाम यही कहता है कि मेरा ज़कात का पैसा हिंदू बच्चे को नहीं दे सकता? ये कहां का इंटरप्रिटेशन है आपका इस्लाम? आपका इस्लाम आपकी जेब में रख के निकला हुआ है. हमें अपने मुल्क में अपनी तरह जीने की बुद्धि हमारे बच्चों में है. मॉडर्न एजुकेशन, मॉडर्न ख्यालात और फ्यूचर हमारे बच्चों पे हमको हिम्मत लेनी चाहिए, उनके सोच के लिए प्रमोट करना चाहिए. आपके धकियाने से ख्यालात उनके दिमाग में नहीं डालिए. So even these organizations have to become sensitive. Just आपको आपके ग्रुप बना के प्राइम मिनिस्टर के साथ चोरी से जाके मिलके आप उनके दुआ सलाम लेने चले जाते हैं, मगर आपको हिंदू सोसाइटी के साथ रहने के नुस्खे आपको बता नहीं सकते आप लोगों को, हमारे मुसलमान बच्चों को. यही एक प्रॉब्लम है जो मुस्लिम्स को गेटो में डाला हुआ है. हमको पब्लिक स्पेस में जाना है. पूरा इंडिया का एक एक कण मुसलमान का है. इंडिया का एक एक जर्रा के ऊपर मुसलमान का हक है. ये समझाओ मुसलमान को. आई होप प्रोफेसर शाबान गॉट some answer from this.
Yeah, must be listening. These two small questions I'm clubbing together.
Yes.
Naveen is saying that one is born in Hindu with religious identity, but there is less and very least equality within that. The question of caste, I think, is referring about. And Ishtikar is asking what we talked about Muslims, but what do we need to talk about Pasmanda Muslims or underprivileged Muslims? You know, how we reflect.
No, these are very important and very tough questions. Caste type situation Muslims में भी है, मैं खुद जानता हूँ. मुझे मालूम है अपने बेटियों को शादी करने में हम क्या क्या करते हैं, अपने बच्चों को शादी करने में हम क्या क्या करते हैं. आई थिंक ये चीज हमारे मुसलमानों से कब निकलेगी पता नहीं है. मगर मैं जहां तक हिंदू कौम की बात हो रही है, हिंदू सिस्टम में जो कास्टिज्म है वो लिक्विडेट हो रहा था, थोड़ा सेक्युलरिज्म आ रहा था, मगर वो फिर री इन्फोर्स हो रहा है बिकॉज ऑफ द हिंदू आइडियोलॉजी. जो कास्ट सिस्टम है वो बहुत स्ट्रांग होगा आगे चल के. तो मैं आई एम नॉट ए सोशल रिफॉर्मर फॉर हिंदूज, नॉर आई एम ए सोशल रिफॉर्म फॉर मुस्लिम्स। मगर जब मैं कह रहा हूं कि मुस्लिम शुड बिकम हिंदू सेंसिटिव, वी शुड बिकम सेंसिटिव टू एवरी हिंदू, नॉट ओनली टू दलित एंड ओबीसीज। दलित और ओबीसीज एक ऐसे चुंगल में फंसे हैं, उनकी सोशल मोबिलिटी, उनका सोशल हायरार्की लो कास्ट से हाई कास्ट की तरफ जाता है। यहां तक के हमारे मोदी जी जो हैं वो ओबीसी हैं, मगर ये पूरे पॉलिसीज, ये ब्राह्मणिज्म, ब्राह्मणिकल कल्ट, मैं ब्राह्मण एज ए कास्ट को मैं कुछ कहना नहीं चाहता, because I know this nation is built by Brahmins of India in the early period. I know a lot of IAS officers, I know a lot of professors who are thoroughbred Brahmins, and they are very close friends of mine. Without them, this India would not have been built. Take my word for it. But so far casteism is concerned, Modi ji is also trying to, to protect the casteist culture of India, which is the biggest mistake of BJP. We have to bring secularism. Secular word है, अब गाली बन गई है। Secular इज्जत, सबकी equal इज्जत करना एक गाली बन गया है। This will destroy India in future. वो destroy India आपको सिर्फ हिटलर जैसा बन के ही एक दफा आपको जर्मनी को बनाएंगे ऐसा जरूरी नहीं है। आपकी बुद्धि भ्रष्ट हो जाएगी, आपके बच्चे, फ्यूचर बच्चे, आपकी एक हिंदू का जो हिंदुइज्म जो इतना महान फिलॉसफी है, वो फिलॉसफी को ही आप बर्बाद कर रहे हैं। सो दैट इज द रीजन व्हाई वी मुस्लिम्स शुड नॉट डिस्क्रिमिनेट बिटवीन कास्ट विद इन हिंदुइज्म। हमें दलित और ब्राह्मण दोनों प्यारे हैं। और मेरी एक और बात सोचिए, कुछ लोग
वाला इंसान नहीं हो, तो जो हिंदू है, जो हिंदू लो कास्ट हिंदू हैं, वो अपनी सोशल आइडेंटिटी विद इन हिंदू हायरार्की के अंदर पाना चाह रहे हैं। बिकॉज ऑफ दैट रीजन मुस्लिम्स का और लो कास्ट, मुस्लिम्स का और ओबीसी का तालमेल नहीं हो सकता। मोमेंटरीली होने की संभावना है, मोमेंटरीली, एक मीटिंग में, एक दावत में, एक पॉलिटिकल इलेक्शन के वक्त, मगर ये लॉन्ग टर्म स्ट्रेटेजी हो नहीं सकती। और ये क्योंकि रिजर्वेशन पॉलिसी दलित और ओबीसी को गवर्नमेंट सिस्टम ने बहुत स्ट्रांगली अलो कर दिया है, और मुसलमान जब भी रिजर्वेशन की बात करता है तो वो डर जाता है, ओबीसी हिंदू और दलित हिंदू डर जाता है कि उनके कोटे के अंदर शेयर मांग रहे हैं। इसीलिए मैंने आपको वेरी स्पेसिफिकली बोला है कि मुसलमान का शेयर, इकोनॉमिकली वीकर सेक्शन जो 10% कोटा दिया है इस गवर्नमेंट ने, उसके अंदर 45% शेयर मुसलमानों का है। दैट अलोन विल टेक केयर ऑफ द मुस्लिम इंटरेस्ट। सो प्लीज, हिंदूज का मतलब है ऑल हिंदूज, उसके अंदर आप अंतर करेंगे अपने रिलेशनशिप डेवलप करने में तो मुस्लिम्स के लिए धोखा होगा। तो मुस्लिम्स में ब्राह्मण्स भी मुसलमानों के लिए इतने ही प्यारे हैं, दलित्स भी इतने।
I mean, Sayyid Noor is asking that do we have any platform where religion is not a criteria, but has an opportunity to take leadership of a responsible India?
Hello.
Yeah, could you take the question?
Hello.
Hello. Shall I repeat? Shall I repeat?
Hello. Anybody?
Yeah, shall I repeat?
Hello.
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 Yeah, you are audible, sir.
You are audible.
Hello.
You are audible to us, sir.
Sound. I am unable to hear. Somebody has to increase your sound level.
There is question that
I cannot hear Zia. Zia की आवाज नहीं आ रही है.
like, can you
बहुत-
read?
Sir, can you hear us? Hello?
Hello.
Zia bhai, can you connect him on phone?
Yeah.
Please.
Hello. I think it may be my earbuds. So, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we are hearing you.
I cannot hear you. आपका कुछ आवाज बढ़ सकता है या मेरा प्रॉब्लम है? अच्छा,
अब आ
मैं
रही?
देखता हूँ इसको. मेरा
अब आ रही
साउंड
है?
सिस्टम तो फुल है.
Now, can you hear me? Can you hear me, sir? Can you hear me?
Yeah, bhai, there is lot of echo in your voice.
He got disconnected. Good number of questions are there. Maybe if he connects in a minute, we'll take 2-3 more questions, or we'll be able to wind up. I'm trying him over phone. There are important questions which is about, how to be more sensitive towards our neighborhoods, to our Hindu friends, and questions that what could be this. Maybe we close now.
Hello?
Yeah,
Zia bhai.
better we close because he is not getting connected, and we have already. We will request him for some other time on other issues which is not answered now. Friends, like I think it was very fruitful and meaningful discussion. Listening Professor Abu Saleh Sharif. As you know, he talks very direct and he answers very direct to the point. Those who know and is aware about his work knows that he has been writing. Apart from, he is not really a very popular speaker, but then he lives more on research, doing research and writing on the area of his interest, and definitely the important take point which I thought was that how Muslims should be engaged through public space, and which public space which he wanted to explain, but he is not there. We'll be having him next time. But then the very one point which I remember, that what he is saying, that Muslim development, any nation's development or India cannot develop without considering Muslim as part of the development of the country. So national development lies with the development of Muslims in India. In response to that Muslims should also come forward, assert themselves, and take their space in the public space, which is school, hospital, the participatory process in governance, etc. So these are important take points. We'll try to share the brief points what he desired to share with all of you, and more discussion can be taken out from that. I thank everyone here. Each participant, we had good number of participants quite early in the morning. Now we have to wind up. Thank you everyone on behalf of Democracy Dialogue. Thanks to the technical support team of the Democracy Dialogue. Thank you everyone, and we look forward for another event very soon. We'll be sending talk we are going to organize on informal labor possibly, and the problem faced by informal labor. Thank you everyone. Have a good day. Bye bye.